These two buildings that you see across the street here, this is going to be our community production center.
So the idea of us having a fabrication lab was to get the technology that's coming in the next generation, to get ahead of the curve and learning that technology, democratizing that technology so that people in this community will be able to use it, determine its uses, advance it, and begin to be able to produce everything that we need for ourselves as opposed to relying on the usual capitalist means of acquiring whatever goods and services that you need. The equipment that we'll have in here, the things that are popularized are 3D printers, laser cutters, water cutters, the ability to make electronics, program electronics, to make physical goods with molding and casting, to cut wood, to cut metal, to shape wood, to shape metal, to shape plastic, and any number of things. Initially, this facility is going to focus on education, so we'll pull in some students from local universities. We'll also put in some community members. We'll maybe even pull in some people from outside of the community to do the first couple of waves of learning. But once this is up and running and we've done a good bit of education and have a sufficient amount of people that can teach the equipment, teach the material, then this building is going to be a much more open and community space. It'll be what we call our maker space. Once that's up and running, we hope to sort of replicate the equipment that we'll have in that building and open this up to the community. So if people want to build their own houses, use certain bits of technology, use the tools that we have, it'll be sort of open sharing community space where people will be able to come in and make the things that they want after getting the training on the equipment that we'd have in that building. But it's also going to be a two-way exchange because you got a lot of people in this community with a lot of skills in farming, mechanics, businesses, in just about anything that you can imagine. Black Jackson is income poor, but not experience poor. There's a lot of people with a lot of skills here.
Envisioning a new economy, which I know is going to be extremely hard because we currently run off of this, system where you got to have money, but, really evaluating and thinking about like, what do I need and what do I want?
The just transition piece requires a lot of creativity to address the inequality issues to make it, I think, far more practical and less abstract. How does this sit with 50% unemployment in this city? We have a campaign called the Union Co-op Initiative where we're trying to engage the unions, and it's a struggle. It's really three unions that support it. The teachers union, JFT, CWA, which is the public employees, and the UAW, United Auto Workers. Organized labor in the United States is basically down to 10%. Most of that is public sector workers. The unions have never really been strong in Mississippi. Never.
Nissan is the factory that's here.
They will say how they do not need a union. They have an open door policy. We find out that that's not true. They ignore a lot of the complaints or grievances that the workers have. I wouldn't say Nissan don't recognize unions. They don't recognize unions in the United States. They have unions all over the world in all the plants except of the three here in the United States.
The Nissan workers trying to unionize, and there were instances where folks had guns pulled out on them. It definitely turned into white against black, and the plant was majority black, where white workers were getting things that the black workers weren't getting.
Mississippi is still racist. The practices of this state is racist, and that's the whole reason they came here. The Canton plant is the most producing plant out of all the Nissan plants. It profits more than other Nissan plants. Yet we still get paid the less, we get treated the worst.
There were a number of workers at one point who were testing positive for cocaine and marijuana who had been working there for years or were about to be turned over into full-time employees. One of those workers was white, the other 8 were black. There's a clinic right across the street from that plant. Those folks went right across the street to get a drug test for what they were told they were tested positive for, and it tested negative. There was one white man who went across the street, did the same process. His job was given back.
I took hair samples, I did urine samples, I took blood samples. They wouldn't accept none of them. And then they didn't show me the results that they said I failed. I didn't see none of those either. They just walked me out the door.
People have compared it to plantations, and so corporations are looking to come to places like Mississippi because they know that folks are not employed or there's not a lot of opportunity for employment.
One of the things that we're really trying to say, look, you're one of the bodies, working class entity that has tremendous amount of resources in the case of the AFL-CIO. You guys can serve as a bank for your own development if you so choose, right? An investment in the development of your own members, if you just want to start there in their future. You can do your own just transition. A lot of the unions forget that they once had co-ops internal to their own operation to take care of many of the social services that people needed before the welfare state created those things. Like unions actually used to have that in shop. This may sound funny to a lot of people, but the lead of our Just Transition campaign is focused right now around human rights budgeting. We have to have a material foundation in order to lay the transition, not saying we're just automatically going to pay police or we're just automatically going to pave the roads, but like, no, we may not need them. We may not want them. The budget has to be determined by the democratic priorities that are expressed from the Assembly. We are aware the pie is limited. We're aware that the tax revenue is decreasing. But we're trying to argue with our own folks to say that's the wrong way of looking at it, as opposed to what are the skills and the resources we do have in the community that are not being tapped into, that are not being utilized, that could be tapped into if we create a real broad, dynamic solidarity system. So let's say we can move the municipality to creating a time banking system, and somebody could exchange some labor around installing a solar system for a bill being paid. We got all these empty houses out here, but we got all these people who have the skills to fix them. Like, that's up to us. It's not a limitation that we have to accept. That's what we're trying to put to the city. That's a crisis of imagination. We can get all that fixed if we want to. We just have to reprioritize some things. It's a kind of an argument to the city. We're not asking you to do anything, but get out the way.
Here in Jackson, I know there's other organizations and there's other cooperatives that are developing.
We've got an 8-block area where we're working to build a sustainable model neighborhood from the inside out, ground up, using all of our blighted and abandoned property and the skills of the people that live here. We build everything using only salvage materials. The whole idea is like to use construction, food production, and folk art to renew and revitalize the neighborhood. We moved here 4 years ago and we bought a house. We bought this house here for $1,500. Everybody's extremely poor, nobody's working, about 90% unemployment rate. We started having neighborhood meetings, and what we realized really quickly was that everybody could articulate where they would go if they had more money, if they, had a better job. That's how we started saying, okay, well, if they can see what their ideal place would be, well, why not start organizing with that, saying look, we can own this space and we can start to create what we can see. We did a skills assessment and we found that 90% of the residents actually have a farming background, a farming skill. And we had a lot of land. And this, where the farm was the neighborhood dumping ground. And the people wanted to figure out how to clean it up. So we decided to put a farm there that actually looks like a landscape cottage garden because of the trauma associated with farming. So that is a big part of our challenge, is getting people, although they have that skill, back into growing food, to make money. Because that's the number one thing that people want to do here, is they want to make money. We have a main street, so right now we're working to build a neighborhood economy. So we have to be able to make the place feel safe enough for people with disposable income to come in and buy products that we produce. We have a youth apprentice program, so we work with the neighborhood youth, teaching them different skills. So everything that is done here is done by the people that live here. We call it neighbor labor, and they're paid. As we start to make the place feel safe, that's when organized capital comes in and displaces people. So we bought all of the vacant land. So we own 65 properties as a neighborhood collective. It's more like a quiet radicalism, our approach, because we're not ready to raise our head. You raise your head, it gets chopped off, you know what I mean? So we're kind of quietly here building an infrastructure that will be able to resist the forces that we know will come as soon as we build something that is really great.
A core part of the program is doing the community land trust so that we decommodify land as much as possible. Eventually, we'll take more and more people away from the urgency of having to worry about having a roof over my head and paying ground rent and paying rent, which pushes you and drives you in a certain sense to have to engage the market on the market's terms. It has to become a communal entity and something that we create communal rules around how to use, how to protect, how to preserve, how to regenerate. And that's how we wind up getting this building and then using this as a base to grow out and expand. We've placed more of a priority on actually, in a certain sense, acquiring the land and even ahead of kind of building co-ops. And we bank a premium. We don't build on anything that we don't own. Like that's a principle of ours. Because if we feel that if the community land trust owns it, and if we put some institution on it, a co-op that doesn't survive or something like that, you can repurpose the use of that for something else, as opposed to having to go rent someplace or your business being driven out of business because the landlord forces the rent up on you. This street is very strategic for us. If you turn this way, you are literally a 5-minute walk from downtown. A mile and a half down this road is the Jackson Zoo. It's the largest golf course in the city of Jackson. And then right behind that is the original airport. And then right behind that, there's a free trade zone. You have this downtown expanse of new businesses they want to create that connect people to the zoo. This way is like your due north, and the gentrification is coming down this way. We've become, I would argue, a roadblock by, in many respects, fortifying this institution. Most of this block is owned by that organization. That organization is a Christian-based homeless center. It's the largest homeless service provider in the state of Mississippi. The Chamber of Commerce, they've been trying to remove them from this block for a long time. Between basically two organizations, we now own 90% of this block. So if we don't sell, there's no pressure for them to have to move their operation. It means that the forces of gentrification have less of an incentive to come here. And this is a communally owned space, it's not individually owned. And this is a communally owned space, it's not individually owned. Options for the community of how land ownership and things can be different and serve different purposes. We're trying to learn how to be democratic. We don't know how to do that. I've never lived in a democratic society. I really don't know what that looks like. We are in a period right now where there's a lot of intense debate around which way to go forward. For instance, I didn't want and was trying to give a warning about Chokwe Antar running for mayor this time. It was my analysis that without a real strong social movement that was dictating the terms, that we were going to be in a position of being dictated to by capital to actually enforce the austerity that we've been fighting all along. People believing that their agency actually counts and matters, I think is more important than expedient victories. The social movement in Jackson the last couple of years was not as strong as it was and has been a couple of years prior. A lot of that transitioned into Chokwe's campaign committee and then Chokwe Antar's campaign committee. Who should be in the lead? The social movement or the party apparatus and the government apparatus? And I'm on the side that at all times, the social movement should be the driving force, has to be the driving force. We have the highest number of black elected officials in the country, bar none, and we're still the poorest state. That's been the case basically since 1972. As neoliberalism continues to advance, you wind up adopting elements of its logic, which force you to look at politics as a market exchange as opposed to a political practice. There was a phrase I first heard in the 80s from the social movements in Venezuela, and it's recently coming back to the forefront of my mind and my imagination. We don't want to be the government, we want to govern.